Money makes the world go round, so it's no surprise that people are relatively interested in movies about money. Finance movies have been around forever, but in my lifetime specifically, their popularity boomed in the 2010s. Some were massive hits like The Wolf of Wall Street, even though that movie is wildly misunderstood, and others bombed horrendously, like The Billionaire Boys Club. We're still getting finance movies these days too, with the likes of last year's Dumb Money. Adam McKay's The Big Short is another finance movie from the 2010s, and I think it's a ton of fun. It was McKay's first venture into the world of drama after his early career directorial ventures from the 2000s that were all team-ups with Will Ferrell. I love The Big Short. McKay's humor definitely still shines through, and it's really well acted by the ensemble cast. While I was only 7 when America's economy shit itself, I've always thought the idea that the entire nation is asleep at the wheel financially was a really interesting one to explore. So while searching for similar movies that cover the same subject matter, I decided to check out the much lesser known Margin Call from 2011. It should be no surprise that I thought it was awesome, given it's the subject of today's video. The Big Short follows various groups of investment bankers, traders, and fund managers as they research and uncover the truth about the weak foundation of the US economy over the course of several months and bet against it, or short it, hence the name. Margin Call, on the other hand, pulls the curtain back on the day the dominoes finally begin to topple from within the walls of an investment banking firm. The two movies are very different, with Margin Call having less than 10% of the budget of The Big Short, but Margin Call uses this to its advantage to tell the story that it wants to tell, helped out tremendously by what looks more like an ensemble cast of its own now more than it probably did when the movie was made. Enough with the intro though. Let me tell you about Margin Call. Margin Call came out in 2011 and was written and directed by J.C. Chandor. This is his first ever feature film, and it's definitely an impressive first step onto the scene in Hollywood. I'd imagine this is also a pretty personal story to Chandor, since he grew up in the area and his father was an investment banker, so he's known the industry his whole life, and it definitely gives him a bit of an insider edge when writing up realistic dialogue and understanding how these investment firms really function outside the big screen. Chandor swears this is completely a work of fiction, but it's been heavily speculated that this movie is based on Lehman Brothers, but that doesn't particularly matter to the story. He probably just didn't want to be sued. Margin Call is able to excel at telling a massive story on a very personal scale. The movie begins with a gutting of one of the floors of the bank's staff, getting us off to a hot start and setting the tone for the cutthroat nature of our unnamed investment bank. This is where we're introduced to our primary cast of characters, played by Zachary Quinto, Penn Badgley, Paul Bettany, and Stanley Tucci. Later we get introduced to Kevin Spacey, who is a high-level type of executive, and even later on we get Jeremy Irons as the president of the company. Quite the ensemble, like I said, and it's really fun to watch these guys work together. Paul Bettany specifically is awesome in this movie, and I hope people can see him as more than just Vision from the MCU, because this guy is super talented.
Listen, nothing I'm going to say is going to make you feel any better. It's just going to suck for a while and then you'll be fine. Hey, Eric. Don't beat yourself up too much about this stuff, all right? Some people like driving the long way home. Who the fuck knows, right?
They all get good help from the script as well, which gives each of the characters we follow not only an opportunity to shine individually, but also gives these characters distinct personality traits to let them play around with in their performances. We don't get a picture of a bunch of finance bros, although we do get one. That's Badgley's character's whole thing.
Will, did you really make $2.5 million last year?
Instead, we get to see smart people trying to navigate through an unthinkable problem while grappling with what sort of implications the problem they're facing will have not only on their lives but on the world as a whole. The problem in question is that their firm's model relies heavily on mortgages and the housing market, and Quinto and Tucci's characters' efforts combine to uncover the fact that these are worthless and going to bankrupt the company. Margin Call also uses this conflict to explore how differences in opinion come into play during the conflict resolution process. Specifically, the dynamic between Spacey and Irons' characters explores this issue very well, and it's a lot of fun to watch the two of them play off of each other. It's a movie with a small scale, as most of it takes place on the single floor of an office building, but it definitely doesn't feel like it due to these implications at play, and the small scale with big consequences thing played a role in how much I really enjoyed this movie. Another thing that made this movie really enjoyable to me was how they dealt with the finance lingo in the dialogue and story overall. Not everyone who finds this stuff interesting is a finance major, myself included, and the script directly addresses this problem. Where The Big Short had a $50 million budget and can afford to have celebrities cameo in and explain the financial lingo to you, which I did think was a really fun bit, Margin Call's $3.5 million budget doesn't exactly allow for this. So what do? They insert characters who know less about the numbers than the experts do, and have the experts dumb it down intentionally in order to explain what's going on to these other characters and the audience at the same time. Kills two birds with one stone, and I thought it was yet another smart play in an already smart movie.
You could tell me what you think is going on here. And please, speak as you might to a young child or a golden retriever. It wasn't brains that got me here, I can assure you of that.
I'll give you another example of why I think this movie's smart. Tucci's character is fired at the start of the movie, and his company email and cell phone are shut off. Later on in the story, they need to get a hold of him, but they can't because his phone's been shut off by their own doing. The precise storytelling of a potentially throwaway line coming into play in the story later down the line is exactly the sort of thing this movie excels at. Absolutely nothing about this being important is telegraphed, but still very clearly communicated so that the audience is aware of the problem already when it comes into play. Margin Call does stuff like this throughout the entire runtime, and it makes it extra fun to see the story unfold in a very smart way. The story itself is interesting not because it's a mystery per se, as within the first 30 minutes, the problem has been both introduced and uncovered, but it's an interesting story because it deals with the response to the problem. In contrasting this movie with The Big Short, that movie is mostly about uncovering the bubble in the market and why it's happening. Margin Call tells us early on that the music is about to stop and explores how a fictional but very grounded in reality investment bank is going to deal with the issue. I don't know if it's possible for me to spoil anything because it is so based in reality, but events like this we see play out really happened all over America and culminated in the Great Recession of 2008. A movie about such a pivotal historical event that most of us can remember should always be interesting, but taking a look at what exactly kicked it off and so suddenly is something that I never knew I wanted to see, and I'm glad that I have now that I've seen it. Margin Call doesn't ask much of us as an audience, except to give it a fair shot, and if you do, I don't think you'll be disappointed. A smart and engaging story full of fantastic performances top to bottom that explores how people with different dispositions react in times of crisis. I really like Margin Call, so if it sounds up your alley, give it a shot, and you might find yourself with a new sleeper to recommend to your finance bro friends. It only has 94,000 logs on Letterboxd, a common denominator on my channel. If you are a repeat viewer, I like to talk about these smaller movies. That's kind of the point of this thing. Margin Call was a movie I knew I needed to talk about as soon as I had the idea to make a YouTube channel, because it has everything you could hope for, not only in a movie like this, but in my opinion, a movie in general. So go check out Margin Call if you haven't. If you have, I hope I've adequately fulfilled your desire to listen to a faceless YouTube personality talk about it like I know I personally enjoy so much. That's all I've got today though. Hope you enjoyed, and if you did, go ahead and click some of those buttons for me so YouTube shows my videos to people. Hopefully I'll catch you next time. Cheers.